I came home to silence. Not the peaceful kind you get after a long day, but the wrong kind. The kind that makes your blood freeze. My wife Harper's car was in the driveway, but the front door was wide open, swaying in the wind like a broken promise. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. I should have known something was wrong the moment I turned onto Maple Street. After 12 years in Delta Force, you develop instincts that never leave you. The same instincts that kept me alive in Afghanistan, Syria, and places the government pretends we were never sent to. But coming home to suburban Chicago, I let my guard down. I thought I was safe. I thought my family was safe. My name is Adrian, and 48 hours ago, I was just another dad rushing home from a business trip. I had spent 3 weeks in Denver, consulting for a private security firm, the kind of boring civilian work that pays the bills but never quite fills the void left by military service. Harper had been excited about my return. She'd texted me pictures of the welcome home dinner she was preparing with our 7-year-old son, Blake. Daddy's favorite spaghetti and meatballs, the text had read, with a photo of Blake covered in flour, grinning at the camera. That was 6 hours ago. Now I stood in my driveway, every nerve ending screaming danger. The neighborhood was too quiet. Mrs. Patterson next door always had her TV blaring at this hour, but her house was dark. The streetlight that had been flickering for months was completely out. I approached my front door like I was clearing a hostile building in Fallujah. Each step calculated, each breath controlled. The door frame was splintered. Not kicked in. That would have been messy, obvious. This was surgical. Professional. Harper. I called out, my voice carrying through the empty hallway. Nothing. The living room told the story. Furniture overturned but arranged, like someone had tried to stage a burglary but didn't quite understand how real chaos looks. Harper's purse was still on the kitchen counter, wallet untouched. Her wedding ring sat beside the sink, and that's when I knew. Harper never took off her ring. Not to do dishes, not to garden, not even when she was angry at me. In 8 years of marriage, I had never seen her hand without it. I found them in Blake's bedroom. Harper was lying beside his race car bed, her blonde hair spread across the blue carpet like spilled sunlight. There was no blood, no obvious trauma. She looked peaceful, almost like she was sleeping. But her eyes, her beautiful green eyes that used to light up when I walked through the door, were open, staring at nothing. Blake was in his bed, clutching his stuffed elephant. The same elephant he'd had since he was 2. The one he claimed protected him from monsters. It didn't protect him from the real monsters. They looked peaceful. That was the sick part. Whoever did this wanted it to look natural, like carbon monoxide poisoning or some tragic accident. But I knew better. In my line of work, you learn to recognize the signs of professional killing. The slight discoloration around Harper's lips. The way Blake's fingers were positioned. This wasn't random. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong. This was an execution. I should have called 911 immediately. Should have played the grieving husband, let the police do their investigation, trusted the system. But as I knelt beside my wife and son, feeling their cold skin under my fingertips, something darker took hold. I had spent 12 years learning how to kill efficiently, quietly, without leaving traces. The army had turned me into a weapon and then expected me to come home and be a suburban dad. For 8 years, I had managed that balance. I had built a life where the worst decision I made was whether to use premium gas or regular. But as I held Harper's lifeless hand, feeling the indentation where her wedding ring should have been, I felt that old familiar fire igniting in my chest. The same fire that had carried me through the mountains of Afghanistan, through the streets of Baghdad, through missions that officially never happened. Someone had declared war on my family. They just didn't know they were dealing with a soldier who had never lost a battle. I stood up slowly, my knees popping from kneeling too long. My civilian life was over. Adrian the consultant, Adrian the soccer dad, Adrian who worried about mortgage payments and parent-teacher conferences. He died in that bedroom alongside his family. What emerged was something else entirely. Something the military had trained for 12 years, but civilian life had kept caged. I walked to my bedroom closet and moved aside the Christmas decorations Harper had organized so carefully. Behind them, wrapped in oilcloth, was a case I hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside were items that officially didn't exist. Untraceable weapons, fake identification papers, cash in multiple currencies, and equipment that could track a target across 3 continents. The man who killed my family thought he was dealing with some suburban nobody. In about 6 hours, he was going to learn the difference between a citizen and a soldier. I had 48 hours before their bodies would start to decompose enough for neighbors to notice the smell. 48 hours before police would arrive and turn this into an investigation that could take months or years. I only needed 24. The first rule of warfare is knowing your enemy. I had 12 hours of darkness to work with before sunrise, and I intended to use every minute. I started where any good investigator starts, with the evidence the killers left behind. But unlike the police who would eventually arrive, I wasn't looking for fingerprints or DNA. I was looking for signatures, the kind of details that separate professionals from amateurs. The lock on my front door had been picked, not forced. Whoever did this used a tension wrench and rake picks, old-school techniques that take years to master. The scratches on the metal were minimal, precise. This wasn't some street thug who learned from YouTube videos. This was someone with military or intelligence training. In Harper's purse, I found something the staged burglary should have removed: her work phone. Harper was a forensic accountant for Morrison & Associates, a firm that specialized in tracking money laundering for federal prosecutors. Her last 3 calls were all to the same number, a number that wasn't in her contacts. I dialed it from my untraceable phone. "Gino's Pizza," came a gruff voice with a thick Chicago accent. "I'd like to speak to the manager about a delivery that never arrived," I said, using a code phrase from my intelligence days. "Wrong number, buddy." The line went dead, but I had what I needed. The accent, the background noise, the way he answered. This wasn't actually a pizza place. It was a front, and judging by the area code, it was somewhere on the south side. I moved to Blake's room next, searching for anything out of place. That's when I found it. A small piece of paper tucked under his mattress. Not hidden by Blake, but placed there by someone else. On it was written a single word in block letters: paid. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a hit. This was a message. I spent the next 4 hours doing what I did best: gathering intelligence. Using skills the military had taught me and equipment that officially didn't exist, I traced Harper's work files. 3 weeks ago, she had started investigating a series of shell companies linked to construction contracts in downtown Chicago. The money trail led to something called Torino Enterprises. One Google search later, I had my answer. Vincent Torino, alleged underboss of the Chicago outfit, suspected in 12 murders, never convicted of anything more serious than tax evasion. His construction company had been awarded over $40 million in city contracts over the past 2 years. Harper had been following the money, and apparently, she had gotten too close to something someone wanted to stay buried. I pulled up Harper's work calendar on her laptop. Her last appointment was yesterday at 2 p.m. with someone listed only as VT Torino meeting. She had scheduled it for Millennium Park, public enough to feel safe, isolated enough for a private conversation. She never came home from that meeting. Using my old military contacts, I ran Vincent Torino through databases that civilian law enforcement couldn't access. What I found painted a picture of a man who had survived 30 years in organized crime by being smart, careful, and absolutely ruthless. His soldiers weren't the stereotypical wise guys from movies. They were former military, ex-cops, professionals who killed for money and disappeared without a trace. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had killed a Delta Force operator's family and left him alive. By 3 a.m., I had Vincent Torino's home address, his business locations, his daily routine, and the names of 12 men who worked directly for him. I knew where his mother lived, where his daughter went to college, and what restaurant he ate lunch at every Thursday. I also knew that in 6 hours, He would be attending his nephew's first communion at St. Alphonsus Church on the north side. Family was sacred to men like Torino. It was also their greatest weakness. I loaded my gear: tactical vest, suppressed pistol, knife, zip ties, and a small device that would record everything he told me. This wasn't about revenge yet. This was about information. I needed to know who else was involved, how far this conspiracy reached, and whether Harper had shared her findings with anyone else. But as I drove through the empty Chicago streets toward the church, something didn't feel right. The hit on my family was too clean, too professional for a simple mob cleanup. Torino was old school, but this felt different, more sophisticated. There was another player in this game, someone pulling strings from the shadows. Someone who knew enough about my background to make sure I was out of town when they moved against my family. I parked 3 blocks from the church and checked my equipment one final time. In 20 minutes, Vincent Torino would walk out of First Communion Mass, kiss his sister goodbye, and get into his black Cadillac Escalade. He would never make it home. But as I approached the church, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Torino's Escalade was already gone. The Mass was still in session, but his car was nowhere in sight. Someone had warned him I was coming. Someone knew I was hunting. The question was, who? Someone was playing chess while I was playing checkers. That became crystal clear as I sat in my car outside St. Alphonsus Church, watching families stream out of the communion service. No Vincent Torino. No black Escalade. Just innocent people celebrating a kid's first step into faith while I sat there armed to the teeth, hunting a ghost. I had 2 choices: retreat and regroup, or escalate and force their hand. Delta Force doesn't train you to retreat. I pulled out my phone and called the main number for Torino Enterprises. After 3 transfers, I got through to someone who sounded like he gargled gravel for breakfast. Yeah. Tell Vincent that Adrian Rees wants to discuss his wife's final report, I said calmly. He has 1 hour to meet me at Navy Pier, South Dock. Come alone, or I start making his life very public. Listen, buddy, I don't know who you think. 48 hours ago, your people killed Harper and Blake Reeves. Harper was a forensic accountant who found something Vincent didn't want found. Tell him I have copies of everything, and if anything happens to me, it all goes to the FBI. The line went quiet for a long moment. Then, 1 hour. South Dock. No weapons. I'll bring whatever I want, I said and hung up. Of course, I was lying about the copies. Harper's laptop had been wiped clean, another sign these weren't ordinary mob cleaners. But sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy thinks you have. Navy Pier in October is a wasteland of closed tourist attractions and empty parking lots. Perfect for a conversation that might end with someone floating in Lake Michigan. I arrived 30 minutes early and positioned myself with clear sight lines and multiple escape routes. Old habits. Vincent Torino arrived exactly on time, which told me something important. He was military trained too. Punctuality matters in combat. He came alone, as promised, but I spotted at least 3 additional cars positioned around the pier. So much for coming alone. Torino was smaller than I expected, maybe 5'8", thin gray hair, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't hide the slight bulge of a shoulder holster. He moved like a man who had survived 60 years in a world where most don't make it to 40. You're the husband, he said as he approached. Not a question. I'm the widower, I corrected. Thanks to you. He stopped about 10 feet away, hands visible, professional courtesy between killers. I had nothing to do with what happened to your family. Bullshit. My wife was investigating your money laundering operation. She got too close, so you had her eliminated. Torino laughed, but there was no humor in it. Kid, if I wanted your wife dead, she would have disappeared, not been left in your son's bedroom like some amateur hour setup. This wasn't my work. Something in his voice made me pause. In 12 years of interrogating enemy combatants, you learn to read truth from lies. Vincent Torino was telling the truth. Then who? I asked. That's what I've been trying to figure out for the past 2 days. Someone used my name, my reputation, to cover their tracks. Someone who wanted your wife dead, and me to take the blame. He reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Your wife called me 3 days ago. Said she had information about money moving through my construction company, money I never saw. She wanted to meet, compare notes. I took the envelope but kept my eyes on his hands. Inside were photocopies of bank records, wire transfers, invoices for work that was never done. Millions of dollars flowing through Torino Enterprises, but according to these documents, none of it going to Vincent Torino. Someone's been using your business as a front, I said. For 2 years, siphoning city contracts, taking my cut, leaving me holding the bag when the feds come knocking. Your wife figured it out. That's why she wanted to meet. Who has access to your accounts? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Torino lit a cigarette with hands that weren't quite steady. Could be my accountant, could be someone in City Hall, could be one of my own guys. But whoever it is, they're smart enough to frame me and clean enough to make your family's murder look like natural causes. I studied the documents more carefully. The wire transfers all came from something called Midwest Development Trust. The signatures on the invoices were all digitally created. Professional-grade identity theft. I want the name of everyone who had access to these accounts, I said. And I want whoever killed my reputation dead, Torino replied. Looks like we want the same thing. It felt wrong, allying with a man who had probably killed more people than I had. But Harper always said the enemy of your enemy isn't necessarily your friend. Sometimes he's just a useful tool. There's something else, Torino said. The morning your wife died, someone called my office asking about her meeting. New details only 3 people should have known. Me, her, and whoever she was working with. She was working alone. No, she wasn't. He pulled out his phone and showed me a text message. This came from her number, but she was already dead when it was sent. The message read, meeting moved to 3 p.m., bringing my partner to verify documents. Harper died around 2 p.m., according to my estimates. Someone had her phone, knew about the meeting, and was using it to flush out other targets. Who else knew she was investigating? I asked. That's what you need to find out. But Adrian. He used my first name, which meant he'd done research on me too. Whoever this is, they know about your military background. They waited until you were out of town. They knew exactly how to hit your family to cause maximum damage while making you the primary suspect. He was right. When the police eventually found the bodies, I would be the grieving husband who had conveniently been out of town. Classic setup. I've got 3 names for you. Torino continued. 3 people who could have pulled this off. But if I give them to you, and you go after them with your military training, this becomes a war. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Harper's laugh, about Blake's sticky fingers hugging my neck, about the life that had been stolen from me 48 hours ago. I've been at war since I found their bodies, I said. Torino nodded like he'd expected that answer. Then welcome to Chicago, soldier. Hope you're ready to get your hands dirty. Torino handed me 3 photographs as we stood on that cold pier, the wind whipping off Lake Michigan like it was trying to freeze the truth out of us. Marcus Chun, he said, pointing to the first photo. My accountant for 6 years. Has access to every account, every transaction. Smart enough to pull this off, greedy enough to try. The second photo showed a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and expensive jewelry. Natalie Morrison, City Contracts Administrator. She approves every deal, signs every check. Your wife worked for her husband's firm. The third photo made my blood stop cold. It was a man I recognized, not from Chicago, but from my military days. Felix Carver, Torino continued. My head of security. Former Army intelligence, dishonorably discharged 5 years ago for selling information to foreign contractors. Felix Carver. I had served with him in Afghanistan in 2018. He was good at his job, too good. The kind of soldier who followed orders without asking questions, who could kill without losing sleep, who saw civilians as collateral damage. The Army kicked him out when they caught him selling troop movement intel to private contractors. You know him, Torino observed, reading my face. We served together. He's the one who killed my family. How can you be sure? Because he's the only one who would know I was out of town. He knew my schedule, my habits, my weaknesses. I stared at Felix's photograph, remembering the last time I'd seen him. It was at his discharge hearing, where he'd looked me in the eye and promised that someday we'd finish what we started in the mountains of Kandahar. I thought he was talking about some firefight we'd been in. Turns out he was talking about this. Where does he live? I asked. Torino slid me a piece of paper with an address. Lincoln Park. Expensive neighborhood for a security consultant. Whatever he's stealing, it's been profitable. I was already walking away when Torino called after me. Adrian, wait. If you go after him tonight, make sure you finish it. Men like Felix don't forgive, and they don't forget. Neither do men like me, I replied. Felix Carver lived in a converted brownstone that probably cost more than I made in 3 years of military service. I spent 2 hours watching his routine through tactical binoculars. He was careful, swept his car for tracking devices, varied his routes, never followed the same pattern twice. But he had one weakness that military training couldn't overcome: arrogance. At 11 p.m., he came home from what looked like a business dinner. Expensive suit, confident walk, the bearing of a man who thought he was untouchable. He disabled his alarm system using a code I could read from his finger movements, 0618, probably a significant date from his military service. I waited 20 minutes, then made my move. Breaking into Felix's apartment was like stepping back in time. Military precision everywhere, weapons cleaned and displayed, tactical gear organized by mission type, maps of Chicago marked with locations I recognized as Torino's business sites. This wasn't just theft, this was surveillance. But what stopped me cold was what I found on his desk: photographs of my house, my family, my daily routine. Pictures of Harper dropping Blake off at school, me leaving for business trips, even shots of us at the grocery store last month. He'd been watching us for weeks, maybe months. Under the photos was a file labeled Operation Cleanup. Inside were detailed profiles of Harper's investigation, copies of her financial reports, and a timeline that made my blood boil. Felix hadn't just killed my family to cover up his crimes. He'd studied them, learned their habits, planned their deaths like a military operation. The worst part was a handwritten note in Felix's distinctive printing: target neutralized, asset eliminated, mission complete, payment pending. My family wasn't collateral damage. We were a job. I heard his key in the front door and positioned myself behind the kitchen counter. Felix entered like he owned the world, humming some tune I didn't recognize. He made it 3 steps into his living room before he realized he wasn't alone. "Hello, Felix," I said, stepping into the light with my sidearm trained on his chest. To his credit, he didn't panic. Felix had always been good under pressure. He slowly raised his hands and turned to face me with that same cocky smile I remembered from Afghanistan. "Adrian Reeves, I was wondering when you'd show up. Took you longer than I expected. 48 hours to track down my family's killer. Not bad for a civilian." "Civilian?" Felix laughed. "Brother, you haven't been a civilian since the day you put on that uniform. None of us have. We're just better at pretending." "Why Harper? Why Blake?" "Because your wife was about to destroy a very profitable arrangement. She'd traced the money back to 3 different shell companies, identified the bank accounts, even figured out the kickback scheme with city contracts. Another week, and she would have had enough evidence to bring down the whole operation. So you killed a 7-year-old boy to protect your bank account." Felix's smile faltered for the first time. "Collateral damage. Kid was there, might have seen something. Clean operations require clean endings." That's when I knew talking was over. I had spent 12 years learning to kill efficiently, but I had never wanted to kill someone as much as I wanted to kill Felix Carver. Not for country, not for mission, but for pure, personal justice. "You made one mistake," I told him. "Yeah? What's that?" "You left me alive." Felix went for his weapon, a Glock 19 in a hip holster, classic military draw. He was fast, trained, experienced. But he was also arrogant, and arrogance makes you careless. My first shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his gun skittering across the hardwood floor. He stayed on his feet, tough bastard, and reached for a backup piece in an ankle holster. My second shot ended the conversation permanently. Felix Carver died the same way he had lived, violently, efficiently, without dignity. But as I stood over his body, I realized something that chilled me more than the October wind outside. This felt too easy. Felix was good, but he wasn't good enough to plan and execute the kind of operation that had killed my family. He was a soldier, not a strategist. Someone else was calling the shots. I searched his apartment more thoroughly and found what I was looking for in his bedroom safe. A burner phone with exactly one contact listed. No name, just a number with a 312 area code, downtown Chicago. I dialed it. "Is it done?" came a woman's voice, crisp and professional. "Felix is dead," I said. A long pause. "Then who is this?" "The man whose family you killed. We need to talk. Adrian Reeves. I was hoping you'd call. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Millennium Park. Come alone." The line went dead. I had killed the man who murdered my family, but somehow I didn't feel satisfied. This was bigger than Felix, bigger than stolen money, bigger than revenge. Someone had been pulling strings from the beginning, and tomorrow I was going to meet the puppet master. I had 14 hours until my meeting at Millennium Park, and I wasn't going to waste a single minute. Felix's apartment held more secrets than I'd initially realized, and now that he was dead, I could search without watching my back. Hidden behind a false panel in his bedroom closet, I found Felix's real treasure, a laptop containing encrypted files that would have made the NSA jealous. It took me 3 hours to crack the encryption using skills I'd learned in military intelligence, but what I found inside changed everything. Felix hadn't been working alone. He was part of a network called Chicago Solutions, a group of former military and intelligence operatives who specialized in problem resolution for wealthy clients. Their services ranged from corporate espionage to witness elimination, all disguised as legitimate security consulting. The client list made my blood boil. Politicians, judges, business owners, even some federal prosecutors. All people who had paid Chicago Solutions to make their problems disappear permanently. My wife Harper wasn't their first victim. She was number 47. But the file that stopped me cold was labeled Reeves Contract. Inside was a complete dossier on my family, my military service, my weaknesses, and a detailed plan for their elimination. The contract had been paid for 3 months ago, long before Harper had even started investigating Torino's finances. Someone had wanted my family dead for reasons that had nothing to do with money laundering. At the bottom of the contract was a signature I didn't recognize and a single line that made everything clear. Secondary objective: recruit or eliminate primary target upon return. They had killed Harper and Blake not just to silence her, but to turn me into a weapon. Someone knew about my Delta Force background and wanted to use my skills for their own purposes. The grief, the rage, the need for revenge, it was all part of their plan. I was being manipulated, and I had walked right into their trap. The burner phone buzzed with a text message. Change of plans. Tonight. Navy Pier. Same dock. Come alone or more families die. They were accelerating the timeline, which meant I had rattled them by killing Felix. Good. Scared enemies make mistakes. But I wasn't going to Navy Pier. Not yet. According to Felix's files, Chicago Solutions operated out of a warehouse in the South Loop, disguised as an import-export business called Midwest Logistics. If I was walking into a trap tomorrow, I needed to thin out their numbers tonight. The warehouse was exactly what I expected. Industrial, isolated, perfect for activities you didn't want witnesses to see. 2 guards at the front entrance, motion sensors on the perimeter, reinforced steel doors. Professional setup, but nothing a Delta Force operator couldn't handle. I approached from the east side, using drainage ditches and abandoned equipment as cover. The first guard never knew what hit him, a sleeper hold that would keep him unconscious for hours without permanent damage. The second guard was smoking a cigarette, and scrolling through his phone when I slipped a knife between his ribs. Quick, quiet, efficient. Inside the warehouse, I found Chicago Solutions Operations Center. Computer servers, weapons storage, surveillance equipment, and something that made my stomach turn. A wall covered with photographs of targets they had eliminated over the past 5 years. Harper's photo was there, along with Blake's. But they weren't alone. Dozens of families, judges, whistleblowers, investigators. All people who had gotten too close to something someone wanted hidden. I was studying the photos when I heard footsteps behind me. Impressive work, Adrian. You've exceeded our expectations. I turned to find a woman in her 50s pointing a pistol at my chest. Natalie Morrison, the city contracts administrator from Torino's photos. But seeing her here, in command of this operation, I realized she was much more than a corrupt bureaucrat. You killed my family to recruit me? I asked. We killed your family because they were complications. Recruiting you was always the primary objective. She gestured to the wall of victims. Every person on that wall got too close to our network. But instead of just eliminating them, we realized we could use their deaths to motivate the right people. You're insane. We're practical. Chicago Solutions has contracts worth $20 million over the next 2 years. We need operators with your skill set. Felix was good, but he lacked your moral flexibility. Moral flexibility? You've killed 3 people in the past 48 hours without hesitation. That's exactly the kind of focused rage we can harness. She smiled like she was offering me a promotion instead of threatening my life. Join us, and we'll give you targets worthy of your skills. Refuse, and you'll join your family. I had heard enough. My hand moved toward my weapon, but Natalie was faster than I expected. Her first shot sparked off the concrete wall beside my head as I dove behind a shipping container. There are 6 more operators in this building. Adrian, she called out. You can't kill us all. Maybe not, but I could try. The next 10 minutes were pure combat. Military training kicking in, muscle memory taking over, the same deadly dance I had performed in a dozen different countries. But this time, it was personal. 2 operators came from the left, former Marines, judging by their tactics. I dropped them both with headshots before they could find cover. A sniper on the upper level got lucky and put a bullet through my shoulder, but unlucky when I returned fire with a grenade launcher I'd found in their weapons cache. By the time the smoke cleared, Chicago Solutions was down to 3 operators, including Natalie Morrison. This doesn't end here, she screamed from somewhere in the smoke and debris. We have contracts in 6 states. Kill us, and 20 more families die. She was probably bluffing, but I couldn't take that chance. I needed her alive long enough to get names, locations, client lists. But as I moved through the smoke to find her, I stepped on something that clicked under my foot. Pressure plate mine. Military grade. I had exactly 3 seconds before the warehouse became my tomb. 3 seconds isn't long when you're standing on a pressure mine, but it's an eternity when you've been trained to think at the speed of death. I had 2 choices: dive and hope the blast didn't catch me, or stay put and try to defuse something I couldn't even see. Delta Force doesn't train you to hope. I dropped flat, rolling toward the nearest concrete pillar as the warehouse exploded behind me. The blast wave picked me up and slammed me into a shipping container hard enough to crack ribs, but I was alive. Barely conscious, ears ringing like church bells, but alive. When the smoke cleared, I found Natalie Morrison's body 20 feet away. The explosion had killed her instantly, along with any chance of getting information about Chicago Solutions Network. But in her jacket pocket, I found something almost as valuable: a smartphone with her contacts, messages, and location data from the past 6 months. As I limped out of the burning warehouse, I realized the explosion had solved one problem while creating a bigger one. Chicago Solutions was crippled, but now every law enforcement agency in Illinois would be looking for whoever had just blown up a warehouse in the South Loop. I had maybe 6 hours before my description went out on every police scanner in the city. But Natalie's phone revealed something that made my blood freeze. Text messages from the past week, coordinates, meeting locations, and a list of names I recognized from my military days. Chicago Solutions hadn't just been killing witnesses and investigators. They had been eliminating former Delta Force operators who might have posed a threat to their operation. 8 names on the list. 7 had been crossed out with dates next to them, dates when they had died in accidents over the past 2 years. Car crashes, house fires, apparent suicides. All men I had served with. All men who knew how to fight back. I was number 8 on the list, but instead of being eliminated, I had a notation next to my name. Recruit or neutralize. Primary asset potential. They hadn't just killed my family to silence Harper's investigation. They had killed them to turn me into their weapon, and if that failed, to eliminate the last person who could expose what they had done to my former teammates. But now I knew something they didn't expect. I wasn't the last one. According to the phone's GPS history, Natalie had been meeting regularly with someone at a location in Chinatown. Same restaurant, same time, every Thursday for the past 6 months. Today was Wednesday, which meant in 18 hours, I might finally meet the person who had ordered my family's death. I spent the rest of the night in a safe house I had established years ago, an abandoned warehouse in Gary, Indiana, that I had purchased under a false identity after leaving the military. Inside were supplies, weapons, medical equipment, and most importantly, a secure communication system that let me contact people who officially didn't exist. I called a number I hadn't dialed in 3 years. "This better be important," came a gravelly voice that sounded like it had been pickled in whiskey and cigarettes. "Hunter, it's Adrian. I need help." Hunter McKenzie had been my team leader in Delta Force, a man who could read enemy movements like sheet music and plan operations that seemed impossible until they succeeded. He had retired to Montana 5 years ago, supposedly to raise cattle and forget about the war. "Adrian? Hell, boy, I thought you were dead. Got word that Chicago Solutions had added you to their Christmas list. You know about Chicago Solutions? Know about them? Son, I've been hunting them for 2 years. They killed 3 of our guys in Colorado, made it look like a hunting accident. Took me 18 months to figure out it was an organized hit. How many of our people are left? Out of the original 12-man team? You, me, and maybe 2 others if we're lucky. Everyone else is either confirmed dead or missing presumed dead." The weight of that hit me like a physical blow. My Delta Force unit had been one of the most elite teams in the military. We had survived missions that killed entire battalions, fought in wars that officially never happened, and now we were being picked off one by our own people. "Hunter, they killed Harper and Blake." A long silence. Hunter had met my family during a barbecue I had thrown after my discharge. He had taught Blake how to throw a proper punch and had made Harper laugh with stories about my military mishaps. "When?" he asked quietly. 3 days ago. Made it look like natural causes while I was out of town." "Where are you now?" "Chicago. I've taken out 4 of their operators, including Felix Carver and Natalie Morrison. But there's someone else pulling the strings, someone who's been planning this for years." "Felix is dead? Good. That traitor had it coming." Hunter's voice had taken on the tone I remembered from combat situations, cold, calculating, deadly. "But Adrian, if you killed Morrison, you've kicked over a hornet's nest." She wasn't just running Chicago Solutions. She was connected to people in Washington, people who make problems disappear with phone calls instead of bullets. What kind of people? The kind who can make a decorated Delta Force operator disappear into federal prison on terrorism charges. The kind who can erase your military record and rewrite history to say you went rogue and killed your own family. As if summoned by his words, my phone buzzed with a news alert. FBI seeks Chicago man in connection with warehouse explosion and multiple homicides. Below the headline was my photograph, my real photograph, not some grainy security camera image. Someone had pulled it from my military files and released it to the media. "Hunter, I'm burned. My face is all over the news." Then you've got maybe 12 hours before every cop in Illinois is hunting you. "But Adrian, there's something else you need to know. The person who's been running Chicago Solutions, the one who ordered the hit on your family, I know who it is. Tell me, remember Colonel Patricia Hayes from Fort Bragg? Our old intelligence coordinator. I remembered her. Tall, severe, brilliant, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting classified operations. She had been the one who briefed us on missions that never officially happened, who made sure our after-action reports disappeared into files that didn't exist. Hayes has been using Chicago Solutions to clean up loose ends from our old operations. Every man on our team knew details about missions the government wants to stay buried. We were all potential security risks. So she decided to eliminate us? Not eliminate, control. Kill our families, break us psychologically, then recruit us as deniable assets. You were supposed to be her masterpiece, Adrian. The perfect soldier, motivated by revenge, loyal only to the person who gives you targets worthy of your skills. Everything clicked into place. The careful planning, the psychological manipulation, the way they had studied my family for months before striking. This wasn't just about money or corruption. This was about turning America's most elite soldiers into a private assassination unit. Where is she now? That's the problem. Patricia Hayes died in a car accident 6 months ago. Whoever's running this operation now is using her identity and her network, but they're not her. My blood turned to ice. If Hayes was dead, then someone else had taken control of Chicago Solutions. Someone who knew about our team, our missions, our weaknesses. Someone who was close enough to Hayes to inherit her operation and smart enough to improve on her plans. Someone who was still out there, still hunting. And in 6 hours, I was going to meet them face to face. Hunter's revelation about Colonel Hayes changed everything. If she was dead, then someone had been using her identity to run Chicago Solutions. Someone with access to classified military files. Someone who knew our team's psychological profiles better than we knew ourselves. I had 5 hours until the Chinatown meeting, but first I needed to understand who I was really fighting. Using Natalie Morrison's phone, I accessed Chicago Solutions' encrypted server one more time. What I found made my hands shake with rage. Detailed psychological profiles of every member of my Delta Force unit, complete with family photos, personal weaknesses, and recommended motivation techniques for recruitment. Blake's profile was labeled Primary Leverage, Emotional Attachment Maximum. Harper's file contained notes about her investigation skills and a recommendation that she be neutralized with extreme prejudice to prevent information leak. But it was my own file that revealed the true scope of their manipulation. They had been watching me for 3 years, documenting my civilian adjustment issues, my nightmares, my struggle to find purpose after military service. Every detail was designed to identify the perfect psychological trigger. The file concluded with a chilling assessment. Subject exhibits classic post-combat loyalty displacement. The elimination of family unit will redirect protective instincts toward organization. Probability of successful recruitment, 87%. They had murdered my family as a recruitment strategy. At the bottom of my file was a digital signature I didn't recognize, but the timestamp showed it had been updated just 6 hours ago. Someone was still actively managing this operation, still watching my moves, still playing psychological games. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Adrian. I've been waiting for your call. The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Professional, calm, with just a hint of satisfaction. Who is this? Someone who knew your wife very well. Someone who watched your son grow up. Someone who's been closer to your family than you ever realized. Ice formed in my veins. Stop playing games. No games, Adrian. Just truth. Harper thought she was investigating financial crimes, but she was actually uncovering something much more dangerous. Something that could have destroyed careers, ended lives, changed the balance of power in Washington. What are you talking about? Operation Blackwater. Does that name mean anything to you? It did. Operation Blackwater was a classified mission our Delta Force unit had run in Syria 5 years ago. Officially, we had been conducting counterterrorism operations. Unofficially, We had been eliminating witnesses to war crimes committed by private contractors. That mission was buried, I said. Buried, not forgotten. Harper wasn't just investigating money laundering, Adrian. She was tracking payments to the families of civilians killed during Blackwater. Someone had been making compensation payments through shell companies for 5 years, trying to keep the families quiet. The pieces started falling into place. The money flowing through Torino's construction company, the sophisticated financial network, the government connections. This wasn't about mob corruption. This was about covering up war crimes. Harper found the money trail. The voice continued. She traced payments back to defense contractors, military officials, even some members of Congress. She was 3 days away from exposing the entire network when we stopped her. We, the people who were there, Adrian. The people who participated in Blackwater and have spent 5 years covering it up. You were part of my unit. I was part of everything. Your unit, the cover-up, the cleanup operation. I helped plan the mission that made us all complicit in war crimes. And then I helped plan the operation that's been silencing witnesses ever since. My mind raced through possibilities. 12 men on that mission, 9 now dead. Hunter in Montana, me in Chicago. That left 1 unaccounted for. Quentin, I said. Quentin Walsh laughed on the other end of the line. Our former communications specialist, the man who had coordinated our missions, managed our intel, kept our secrets. The man who knew every detail of every operation we had ever run. Took you long enough to figure it out, he said. Though I suppose grief does slow down the thought process. You killed my family. I ordered their deaths, yes. Just like I ordered the deaths of 7 other members of our unit over the past 2 years. We were all security risks, Adrian. We all knew too much about operations the government wants to forget. So you decided to become an assassin for hire? I decided to become a survivor. Do you have any idea what would happen if Operation Blackwater became public? Congressional hearings, war crimes tribunals, life sentences for everyone involved. I wasn't going to prison to protect politicians who sent us to commit murder in the first place. You could have just disappeared, gone off-grid, started over, and leave 8 men with the knowledge to destroy me whenever they wanted? No, Adrian. The only way to guarantee silence was to ensure there was no one left to talk. I was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of Quentin's betrayal. He hadn't just killed my family. He had systematically murdered every man I had served with, every brother who had trusted him with their lives. Why try to recruit me? Why not just kill me with the others? Because you were always the best of us. The most skilled, the most dedicated, the most capable of completing impossible missions. I needed someone with your abilities to help me finish cleaning up the remaining witnesses. What witnesses? There are still 17 civilians who survived Blackwater, scattered across 3 countries. Their families have been receiving compensation payments. But some of them are starting to ask questions. Some of them want justice instead of money. So you want me to kill innocent people to cover up war crimes. I want you to eliminate security risks to protect national interests. The same thing we did for 12 years in uniform, just with better pay and fewer rules. The casual way he talked about murder, about destroying families, about turning our military service into a justification for assassination, it made me want to reach through the phone and strangle him with my bare hands. Where are you, Quentin? Close enough to watch, far enough to run if this conversation doesn't go the way I hope. But Adrian, there's something else you should know. I didn't just kill your family. I have detailed files on 3 other families. Wives, children, parents of potential witnesses. If anything happens to me, if I don't check in every 12 hours, those files get sent to contractors who will finish what I started. You're bluffing. Harper's sister lives in Portland with her 2 daughters. Blake's best friend Tommy lives 6 blocks from your old house. Your mother is in that assisted living facility in Florida, the one with the terrible security system. Should I continue? He wasn't bluffing. Quentin had always been thorough, always planned for contingencies. If he said he had people ready to kill more innocents, he meant it. What do you want? I want you to meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. Navy Pier, same place you met Torino. Come alone, come unarmed, and come ready to listen to a business proposition that will make us both very wealthy. And if I refuse, then by tomorrow night, you'll be planning 3 more funerals. And the night after that, 3 more. I can keep killing people you care about until you agree to work with me, or until there's no one left to protect. The line went dead. I sat in my safe house, staring at Natalie Morrison's phone, feeling the weight of impossible choices. Quentin had me trapped in a psychological cage. Refuse his offer and innocent people die. Accept it and become the weapon he wanted me to be. But there was a third option. One that would require me to become something I had never been before. Not a soldier following orders. Not a victim seeking revenge. But a predator hunting the most dangerous prey of all. A former brother who had become a monster. I had 18 hours until my meeting with Quentin, but I wasn't going to wait that long. Men like him expect you to follow their timeline, play by their rules, react instead of act. That's how they maintain control. But I had learned something in 12 years of Delta Force operations that Quentin had apparently forgotten. The best way to win a psychological war is to change the battlefield entirely. Using the intelligence from Natalie Morrison's phone, I traced Quentin's location to a penthouse apartment in the Gold Coast, one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. The building had doormen, security cameras, and the kind of residents who paid extra for privacy and protection. Perfect place for a man who needed to stay hidden while running an assassination network. But Quentin had made one critical mistake. He thought he was hunting a grieving husband seeking revenge. He had no idea he was dealing with a Delta Force operator who had spent 3 years planning for the possibility that his military past might someday catch up with him. The safe house in Gary wasn't just a hideout. It was a staging area. Inside those shipping containers were weapons, explosives, surveillance equipment, and identity documents I had been accumulating since my discharge. Not because I planned to go rogue, but because I knew that someday, someone might try to use my family against me. I just never thought it would be one of my own brothers. At 3 a.m., I was positioned on the roof of the building across from Quentin's penthouse, watching his windows through night vision scopes. He was awake, pacing back and forth in his living room, occasionally stopping to look at something on his laptop, planning his next move, probably, or reviewing files on his next victims. I waited until 4 a.m., when even insomniacs usually crash from exhaustion. Then I made my way across the gap between buildings using climbing gear that officially didn't exist and rappelled down to his balcony. Quentin's security system was military grade, but I had helped design similar systems during my time in intelligence. Every lock has a key, every code has a pattern, every system has a weakness if you know where to look. I found him asleep in his bedroom, snoring softly with a pistol on his nightstand and a laptop still glowing beside him. Even in sleep, he looked like the man I remembered from our unit, tall, lean, with prematurely gray hair and scars from shrapnel that had nearly killed him in Afghanistan. But looks can be deceiving. The man I had served with would never have murdered innocent families to cover up his crimes. I zip-tied his hands to the bed frame and put duct tape over his mouth before shaking him awake. His eyes opened slowly, then went wide with recognition and fear. "Hello, Quentin," I said quietly. "We need to talk." He tried to speak through the tape, probably threats or bargaining or explanations. I wasn't interested in any of them. "Here's how this works," I continued. "I'm going to ask questions, you're going to nod yes or shake your head no. If you try to lie, if you try to waste my time, if you make any sound above a whisper, I start removing fingers. Understand?" He nodded frantically. "Good. First question, are there really contractors ready to kill innocent families if you don't check in?" He shook his head no. "You were bluffing to control me?" He nodded yes. "How many people are left in Chicago Solutions?" He held up 3 fingers. "Where are they?" I pulled the tape off his mouth, keeping my knife visible as a reminder. "Safe house in Cicero," he whispered. 2 operators and a tech specialist. "But Adrian, you don't understand. I put the tape back over his mouth. I didn't want explanations or justifications. I wanted information. His laptop was still open, logged into the Chicago Solutions Network. What I found there made my blood boil all over again. Detailed plans for eliminating witnesses across 6 states, financial records showing millions in payments from defense contractors, and a list of government officials who were aware of the operation. But the file that stopped me cold was labeled Reeves Family, Post-Mortem Analysis. Inside were photographs of Harper and Blake's funeral, which I hadn't held yet. Surveillance photos of me at their bodies in our house, audio recordings of my phone calls, even transcripts of my conversations with Vincent Torino. Quentin hadn't just killed my family. He had been documenting my psychological breakdown, studying my reactions, preparing a detailed analysis of how grief could be weaponized. At the bottom of the file was a video labeled Contingency Plan, Final Motivation. I clicked play and immediately wished I hadn't. The video showed Harper and Blake in our house, but it wasn't from the night they died. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks earlier, when I was still in Denver. They were tied up in our living room, Harper trying to comfort Blake while he cried for his daddy. "Please," Harper was saying to someone off camera. "We'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt my son." Quentin's voice came from behind the camera. "I'm not going to hurt him, Harper. But I need you to understand something. Your husband is a very dangerous man, and soon he's going to need motivation to do a very important job." "What are you talking about?" "In a few weeks, Adrian is going to think you both died accidentally. He's going to grieve. He's going to want revenge, and eventually he's going to discover that I was responsible. When that happens, I need him angry enough to kill for me." Harper's face went white. "You're going to fake our deaths?" "No, Harper. I'm going to kill you for real. But first, I wanted Adrian to see this video, so he understands that your deaths weren't quick or painless. So he knows that you spent your last moments terrified and begging for mercy." The video continued for another 10 minutes. Harper trying to protect Blake, Blake asking for his daddy, Quentin explaining in calm, professional tones exactly how he was going to use their deaths to manipulate me. They had been alive and terrified for hours before he finally killed them. I ripped the tape off Quentin's mouth and pressed my knife against his throat hard enough to draw blood. "You made them suffer," I whispered. "Adrian, listen to me. You terrorized my wife and child before you murdered them. It was necessary. I needed you angry, focused, motivated. If they had died peacefully, you would have grieved and moved on. But knowing they suffered, knowing they were afraid, that's what turned you into the weapon I needed. I had killed men in combat, eliminated targets in covert operations, ended lives for country and mission and duty. But I had never wanted to kill someone the way I wanted to kill Quentin Walsh. Not quickly, not professionally, not efficiently, slowly, painfully, the same way he had killed my family." "Where are the other 3 operators?" I asked. "Cicero's safe house, 1247 West Roosevelt." "But Adrian, there's something else you need to know. Something about why we were really sent to Syria." "I don't care about Syria anymore. You will when you find out who ordered Operation Blackwater, who knew about the civilian casualties, who authorized the cover-up." Despite myself, I was curious. "Who?" "Your friend Vincent Torino was right about one thing. This goes higher than you imagine. The defense contractor who hired us to eliminate those witnesses? The one who's been paying compensation to keep families quiet. What about him?" "It's not a him, Adrian. It's the woman whose husband's firm your wife worked for. The woman who had access to every file Harper ever created, every investigation she ever conducted." My blood turned to ice. Ophelia Morrison, Natalie's sister-in-law. Natalie Morrison was just middle management. Ophelia Morrison is the one who's been running this operation from the beginning. She used her husband's forensic accounting firm to identify threats, then used Chicago Solutions to eliminate them. The room seemed to spin around me. Harper hadn't stumbled onto the money laundering by accident. She had been investigating it because her boss had assigned her to track the very crimes her boss's wife was committing. Harper was getting close to exposing Ophelia's network. Quentin continued. So Ophelia ordered her death and decided to recruit you as her new enforcement arm. This was never about money laundering or mob connections. This was about a defense contractor's wife cleaning up war crimes using her husband's business as cover. Where is she now? That's what I've been trying to tell you. Tomorrow's meeting isn't with me, Adrian. It's with Ophelia Morrison. She's the one who's been pulling the strings from the beginning. I stared at Quentin, processing this final betrayal. The woman whose husband had employed my wife was the same woman who had ordered her death. And in 12 hours, I was going to meet her face to face. I left Quentin zip-tied to his bed with a choice. He could either help me take down Ophelia Morrison, or I could leave him there for the police to find along with all the evidence of his crimes on his laptop. He chose cooperation, which showed he still had some survival instincts left. But I wasn't going to Navy Pier for any meeting. If Ophelia Morrison wanted to finish this, she could come to me. According to Quentin's intelligence files, Ophelia operated out of her husband's accounting firm downtown. But she lived in a mansion in Lake Forest, 40 minutes north of the city, isolated, private, perfect for a conversation that needed to end with only one person walking away. I spent 6 hours preparing, not just weapons and equipment, but studying everything Chicago Solutions had gathered about Ophelia Morrison over the past 3 years. What I found painted a picture of a woman who was far more dangerous than I had imagined. She wasn't just some defense contractor's wife who had gotten greedy. She was former CIA, specialized in psychological operations, with 20 years of experience in manipulating people and eliminating threats. Her marriage to Richard Morrison hadn't been romance. It had been a strategic alliance that gave her access to forensic accounting resources and legitimate business cover. She had been planning this operation for years, systematically identifying and eliminating anyone who could expose Operation Blackwater. My Delta Force unit hadn't been victims of circumstance. We had been targets on a carefully constructed kill list. At 10 p.m., I called her directly using Quentin's phone. Ophelia Morrison. She answered in a crisp, professional voice. This is Adrian Reeves. We need to talk. Adrian, I was wondering when you'd figure out who was really running this operation. Quentin always was too eager to take credit for other people's work. Your house. 1 hour. Come alone. I don't think so. You've killed 4 of my operators and destroyed millions of dollars worth of equipment. Why would I trust you not to kill me? Because I have something you want more than my death. What's that? The complete files from Operation Blackwater. Audio recordings, video evidence, witness statements, everything Colonel Hayes collected before she died. Enough evidence to destroy every person who was involved in covering up war crimes. A long silence. Then, Hayes destroyed those files before her death. No, she didn't. She gave them to someone she trusted to keep them safe. Someone who was supposed to release them if anything happened to her or to the members of our unit. You're bluffing. Hunter McKenzie is still alive, Ophelia. He is everything. Names, dates, locations, body counts. He's been waiting 3 years for the right moment to release it all. Another pause. What do you want? Justice for my family. Justice for my brothers. And an end to Chicago Solutions. Fine. But not at my house. Millennium Park, 11 p.m. The same place your wife was supposed to meet Vincent Torino. No. Your house, or Hunter releases everything tomorrow morning. I heard her calculating odds, weighing risks. Finally, 1 hour. But Adrian, if this is a trap, if you're planning to kill me instead of negotiate, understand that I have contingencies in place that will destroy more families than just yours. The line went dead. I drove to Lake Forest thinking about Harper, about Blake, about the 7 men from my unit who had died because they trusted the wrong person. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about making sure no one else lost their family to Ophelia Morrison's ambition. Her mansion was exactly what I expected, isolated, expensive, surrounded by enough trees and landscaping to muffle gunshots. But what surprised me was that she had actually come alone. No security, no backup, just a single car in the circular driveway. Either she was incredibly confident, or incredibly stupid. I approached the front door with my weapon drawn, using cover and concealment even though I suspected she was watching me through security cameras. The door opened before I could knock. Ophelia Morrison was smaller than I had imagined, maybe 5'6", with silver hair and the kind of calm composure that comes from 20 years of killing people professionally. She wore an expensive dress like she was headed to dinner at the country club, not a confrontation with a man whose family she had murdered. "Hello, Adrian. You look exactly like your psychological profile suggested you would. Where are the Chicago Solutions files?" "Straight to business." "I appreciate that." She gestured toward her study. "Everything is in there. Financial records, operational reports, target assessments. 5 years of work, all ready to be turned over to someone who can appreciate the scope of what we accomplished." I followed her into the study, keeping my weapon trained on her back. The room was lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive oak desk covered with file folders. "These contain details on 47 successful operations," she continued. "Witnesses eliminated, security risks neutralized, potential threats removed before they could compromise national security." "You mean innocent people murdered to cover up war crimes?" "I mean loose ends tied up to protect American interests." "Do you have any idea what would happen if Operation Blackwater became public? Congressional investigations, international tribunals, military personnel tried for war crimes. Careers destroyed, lives ruined, America's military reputation damaged for generations. Maybe America deserves to have its reputation damaged." She turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw genuine emotion in her eyes. Not remorse or guilt, but disappointment. "You really don't understand, do you? You think this was about covering up some tragic accident in Syria. But Adrian, Operation Blackwater wasn't a mistake. It was policy. Authorized at the highest levels, planned by people whose names you would recognize, executed by soldiers who were told they were protecting national interests." "You're lying." "Am I? Check the files. See who authorized the mission. See who signed the orders. See who knew exactly what you were being sent to do." I opened the nearest file folder and found documents that made my hands shake. Operation orders signed by generals I had respected, authorization memos from Pentagon officials, budget allocations for civilian casualty compensation. Operation Blackwater hadn't been a rogue mission that went wrong. It had been a sanctioned massacre designed to eliminate witnesses to defense contractor corruption. And every person in my unit, including me, had been told we were conducting legitimate counterterrorism operations. "Now do you understand?" Ophelia asked. "You weren't victims of my ambition, Adrian. You were victims of a system that uses soldiers like ammunition and disposes of them when they become inconvenient." I looked up from the files to find her pointing a pistol at my chest. "The question now is whether you're going to help me finish cleaning up this mess, or whether you're going to join your family." Ophelia Morrison had made the classic mistake of every overconfident operative. She assumed I had come to her house to negotiate. She had no idea I had come to end this permanently. "You know what your problem is, Ophelia?" I said, keeping my hands visible while she held the gun on me. "You think like a bureaucrat, not like a soldier." "Meaning?" "Meaning a soldier would have searched me for weapons before starting this conversation." Her eyes flicked down for a split second, long enough for me to activate the device I had been palming since I walked through her front door. A small electronic pulse generator that every piece of surveillance equipment in her house, including the gun she was pointing at me. The lights went out. Her pistol's electronic sight went dark. And in the sudden blackness, I moved. 12 years of Delta Force training had taught me to fight in complete darkness, to use chaos as a weapon, to turn disadvantage into opportunity. Ophelia Morrison might have been CIA, but she had spent the last 20 years behind a desk ordering other people to do her killing. I disarmed her in 3 seconds and had her zip-tied to her desk chair in 10. When I flipped on my tactical flashlight, she was bleeding from a split lip, but otherwise intact. Professional courtesy. I needed her alive long enough to get answers. "The files on Operation Blackwater," I said. "All of them. Where are the complete records? You think killing me will bring back your family? She asked, spitting blood. No, but it will prevent you from destroying anyone else's family. Adrian, you're not thinking clearly. If you kill me, if you expose Operation Blackwater, you're not just taking down corrupt officials. You're destroying every soldier who participated in that mission, including yourself. She was right, and she knew it. If the truth about Operation Blackwater came out, I would face war crimes charges along with everyone else who had pulled triggers in Syria. But I had made peace with that possibility 3 days ago when I found Harper and Blake's bodies. I'm willing to face the consequences of what I did, I said. Are you? What I did was protect American interests. What you did was follow orders. We're both patriots, Adrian. We both served our country. You served yourself. You used patriotism as an excuse to commit murder. I opened more files from her desk, finding records that painted an even darker picture than I had imagined. Chicago Solutions hadn't just been eliminating witnesses to Operation Blackwater. They had been running similar cleanup operations for a dozen different military contractors, covering up war crimes, assassinating journalists, eliminating anyone who threatened their clients' profits. 47 successful operations, I read from one summary report. Estimated value to clients, $230 million in avoided legal settlements and criminal prosecutions. A bargain for everyone involved, Ophelia said. Do you have any idea how much money defense contractors would have lost if all their dirty secrets came to light? How many military careers would have been destroyed? How much damage would have been done to American military capability? How many innocent people died to protect those profits? Acceptable losses in service of the greater good. That phrase, acceptable losses, triggered something in me. It was the same phrase Colonel Hayes had used when briefing us on Operation Blackwater. The same cold, clinical language that turned murder into policy. I found what I was looking for in the bottom drawer of her desk. A secure satellite phone with direct connections to Pentagon officials, defense contractor executives, and government officials who had been paying Chicago Solutions to clean up their problems. This ends tonight, I told her. I'm calling every number in this phone. I'm telling them that Chicago Solutions is shut down, that the cleanup operations are over, that if they want to keep their secrets buried, they'll have to find another way. They'll just hire someone else. There are dozens of operations like Chicago Solutions. You can't stop them all. Maybe not. But I can stop this one. I was about to make the first call when I heard something that made my blood freeze. The sound of vehicles pulling into Ophelia's driveway. Multiple engines, doors slamming, boots on gravel. You said you came alone. Ophelia smiled through her split lip. I lied. Did you really think I would meet the man who killed 4 of my operators without insurance? Through the window, I could see tactical lights sweeping the property. At least 6 men, moving with military precision, surrounding the house. FBI tactical team, Ophelia continued. They've been told that Adrian Reeves, wanted domestic terrorist, is holding me hostage in my own home. They have shoot-to-kill authorization. You're willing to die just to stop me from exposing your operation? I'm willing to die to protect national security. But Adrian, I don't have to die. There's still time for you to make the smart choice. Which is, put down your weapon, surrender to federal custody, and accept a plea bargain that will keep you alive in federal prison instead of dead on my floor. In exchange, Operation Blackwater stays classified. Chicago Solutions officially never existed, and the families of your former teammates receive generous military death benefits. Outside, I could hear tactical teams positioning themselves around the house. In about 2 minutes, they would breach every entrance simultaneously and end this conversation with overwhelming firepower. Think about it, Adrian. Your family is already dead. Your brothers from Delta Force are already dead. Killing me won't bring any of them back. But staying alive might give you a chance to honor their memory. She was making sense, which was the most dangerous thing about Ophelia Morrison. She could take any situation, no matter how evil, and make it sound reasonable. But I thought about Harper's laugh, about Blake's sticky fingers, about 7 good men who had died because they trusted the wrong person. Some things are more important than staying alive. Counteroffer, I said, pulling out the thermite grenade I had been saving for contingencies. In 30 seconds, this house and everything in it turns into ash, including all the Chicago Solutions files, all the Operation Blackwater records, and all the evidence that could be used to prosecute the families of my dead brothers. You're bluffing. No, Ophelia. I'm giving you a choice. Die with your secrets, or live and watch them all come to light. I pulled the pin and tossed the thermite grenade into the pile of files on her desk. 15 seconds, I said. What's it going to be? Through the windows, I could see the FBI tactical team getting ready to breach. In a few seconds, this room would be full of federal agents with shoot-to-kill orders. Ophelia Morrison looked at the burning files, looked at me, and for the first time since I had met her, she looked genuinely afraid. Wait, she said. I'll tell you everything. The complete client list, all the operations, everyone who's been involved. Just don't let those files burn. But it was too late. The thermite was already eating through 5 years of murder and corruption, turning evidence into ash, destroying the network that had killed my family and my brothers. Some secrets, I told her, deserve to burn. The front door exploded inward just as the fire reached the gasoline I had poured under her desk. The explosion threw me backward through the study window as the FBI tactical team stormed into what was left of Ophelia Morrison's mansion. I hit the ground hard, my tactical vest absorbing most of the impact, but conscious enough to roll into the treeline before the federal agents could get a clean shot. Behind me, the house burned like a funeral pyre for secrets that should have been exposed years ago. I made it to my backup vehicle and drove toward the Indiana border with half the FBI looking for me. But I wasn't running away. I was heading toward the one place where this story could finally end properly. Hunter McKenzie's ranch in Montana was exactly as I remembered it. Isolated, defensible, and far enough from civilization that a man could disappear if he needed to. I found Hunter sitting on his porch 3 days later, drinking coffee and reading news reports about the domestic terrorist who had killed a prominent Chicago businesswoman and destroyed evidence in a federal investigation. Figured you'd show up eventually, he said without looking up from his newspaper. Coffee's fresh if you want some. Is it over? I asked. Chicago Solutions is gone. Ophelia Morrison is dead. The files are destroyed. Quentin Walsh is in federal custody, probably cutting deals as we speak. Hunter folded his newspaper and looked at me with eyes that had seen too much combat and not enough peace. But is it over for you? That's a different question. I sat down on his porch steps, feeling older than my 38 years. I keep waiting to feel satisfied. Like justice was served, like Harper and Blake can rest in peace. But I just feel empty. That's because revenge doesn't heal wounds, son. It just creates new scars on top of old ones. Then what was the point of any of this? Hunter was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains that surrounded his property. The point was making sure no other father comes home to find his family murdered by people who were supposed to protect them. The point was stopping a network of killers who hid behind patriotism while they committed atrocities. But the people who ordered Operation Blackwater are still out there. The defense contractors, the Pentagon officials, the politicians who authorized war crimes. They're all still free. Some of them. But you destroyed their cleanup operation. You exposed their methods. You made them vulnerable. Hunter stood up and put a hand on my shoulder. Sometimes the best you can do is make sure the monsters can't hide in darkness anymore. Over the next 6 months, the ripple effects of Chicago Solutions' destruction became clear. Without their problem resolution services, 3 defense contractors faced criminal investigations for war crimes. 2 Pentagon officials resigned in disgrace. A congressional committee opened hearings on military contractor oversight. It wasn't justice for Harper and Blake, but it was accountability for the system that had killed them. I spent those months in Montana, helping Hunter with his ranch and slowly learning how to live with the weight of what I had done. Some nights I dreamed about my family, about the life we should have had together. Other nights, I dreamed about the 12 men who had died because they trusted the wrong people. But gradually, the nightmares became less frequent. The guilt became manageable. The rage that had driven me for so long began to transform into something else. Not forgiveness, but acceptance. On the first anniversary of Harper and Blake's deaths, I drove back to Chicago to visit their graves. The headstones were simple, elegant, with an inscription Harper would have loved. Beloved wife and mother who never stopped fighting for truth. I knelt between their graves and told them about everything that had happened since they died. About the people who had been brought to justice, about the network that had been destroyed, about the families who would never have to suffer what we had suffered. I know you didn't want me to become a killer, I said to Harper's headstone. But I hope you understand why I had to. I hope you know it was worth it. The cemetery was quiet except for the wind through the oak trees Harper had always loved. But somehow, I felt like she was listening. Like she understood that sometimes good men have to do terrible things to protect innocent people. As I drove away from the cemetery, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Is this Adrian Reeves? Came a woman's voice, nervous but determined. Who's asking? My name is Clara Stevens. My husband was investigating defense contractor corruption in Nevada when he died in a car accident 6 months ago. The police said it was just bad weather, but I found some files hidden in our house. Files that mentioned Chicago solutions. I pulled over to the side of the road, feeling that familiar weight settling back onto my shoulders. What kind of files? Financial records, witness statements, evidence of cover-ups. Mr. Reeves, I think my husband was murdered, and I think the people who killed him are still out there. I closed my eyes and thought about Hunter's words on his porch. Sometimes the best you can do is make sure the monsters can't hide in darkness anymore. Where are you now, Clara? Phoenix. But I'm scared to stay here. I'm scared they'll come for me next. Pack a bag with essentials only. Drive to a public place, a mall, a busy restaurant, somewhere with lots of people. I'll be there in 12 hours. You'll help me? I thought about Harper's fight for truth, about Blake's trust that his daddy would always protect him, about 7 brothers who had died because evil people made them disappear. Yeah, I said, I'll help you. Because that's what soldiers do. We protect people who can't protect themselves. We fight for justice when the system fails. We make sure that good people don't have to face monsters alone. Chicago Solutions was gone, but there would always be other networks, other killers, other people who used power to destroy innocent lives. And as long as there were monsters hiding in the darkness, there would need to be people willing to hunt them. My name is Adrian Reeves, and this is what I do now. What did you think of this intense revenge story? Did justice truly get served? Or do you think Adrian should have handled things differently? Drop a comment below